discussion is a practical guide to time travel. I'm a keen time traveller myself, and when I was asked kindly by Nicola to come up with a theme to encompass all the work I've done for this exhibition, and to come up with an interlocutor to discuss this with, I immediately thought of Natasha, who I've known for about 30 years, and we are both fellow time travellers. So time travel, as you know, isn't a case of the H.G. Wells or the Doctor Who thing of having a machine and going to any particular era. Time travel as a serious subject involves going to a particular place during a particular era. And I'm basically late 16th century, early 17th century. And your time travel involves...
probably 18th and 19th century. I'm quite a generalist, so I do keep it very broad, but I can go earlier. I can go up to the Second World War at a push.
Okay, well, I can't do that, but and of course, time travel involves objects, and all of the work that I've made for the exhibition Legends of Albion is less a case of reinventing the ancient myths of Britain as imaginative illustrations. I worked with Natasha's institution, the Society of Antiquaries. It's one of Britain's largest collections of artifacts and historical items. And it's kind of chaotic, the collection, isn't it?
Yes, unfortunately it is.
Yeah. But if you could just explain how does it work, the collection? How have you managed to have all this stuff in your archives? Where does it come from?
Being the operative word. So perhaps I should start by just giving a few words to introduce the Society of Antiquaries. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? The acoustic's a bit odd, but luckily I've got ringing tones. So do give me a wave if you can't hear either of us. So the Society of Antiquaries was formed in 1707 as all the best plans came up in the pub, with three blokes deciding that they wanted to form this society that would be time travelling, thinking about the past through objects, through material culture. And this is something that I'm fairly sure everybody in this room is interested in. But in the 1707, this was a bit of an odd thing to happen. And that was the case throughout most of the 18th century. So the collection is enormous, and I wouldn't actually use the word chaotic, Adam.
Okay, right, sorry.
But we don't necessarily know the sheer scale of what we got. I did ask our librarian today, how many prints and drawings have we actually got? And she said, we think about 25,000, but it's vague. So it's been brought together by the fellows, by interested people who've left things to us. So it has a lot of heart to it. And it is people who want to go back to the past through objects, whether that's through buildings or artwork or shards or scraps of paper or textiles or anything really.
But the thing I love about it is the kind of randomness of it.
Yeah.
An antiquary might be obsessed with a particular thing, such as Stonehenge or Aylesbury, and all their focus is on objects that relate to this one thing. My mission as an artist over the past few months was to reinvent the lost art of the painter-stainer. People know what a painter is. People kind of vaguely know what a stainer is. But the objects that the painter-stainer made have been kind of lost to history. And I first approached the Society of Antiquaries just to find out what they had relating to the art of the painter-stainer. There's a livery company in the City of London, very kind of ancient livery company called the Painter-Stainers Company, and even they didn't know what a stainer did particularly. And I'm reading through the history of the Painter-Stainers Company, very little about the art of the hanging cloth. And I thought it was high time this kind of this lost art was examined and explored within the context of contemporary art. I mean, contemporary artists use archives in a very kind of flighty and fast and loose fashion. So your archive is fortunately very well digitized and searchable through titles and names of objects and thematically accessible. So in coming up with, I mean, I'm a picture maker, and usually the work I make is from my imagination. This was the work in this show is supposed to be an exercise
in kind of using primary sources and nothing but primary sources to reinvent a lost art. So all of the images that I've used in this composite hanging cloths, telling the histories of the legends of Britain, come from your collection. So, however tenuous. So if there's a bird in the story, I would search bird on the Society of Antiquaries, and I'd have come up with on there. But there's just a whole series of things that might be stained glass, seal stones, all manner of etchings, engravings. So there is a chaos to the way I work, but it's kind of focused according to the story I'm trying to tell.
But you see, I really love that. And I mean, the Society has got 3,200 fellows who are people who've shown distinguished service to the wide field of material culture in one way or another. But we've also got a very broad affiliate scheme, and that's just everybody who's interested in history and in objects. And then researchers who show a specialist interest are also allowed to access the beautiful library and the extensive collections. So, of course, most of the people that I'm walking past in the library are experts in some tiny aspect of boreholes or something. They're very interesting, they tell me, or something like that. But actually, I think it's incredibly valuable to have artists coming in and being, I mean, Adam, you're a bad example because you are very expert on history, particularly London history. You know a lot about it. But I think it's absolutely fair enough to have an artist who knows nothing and cares less about history, purely responding in a visual way and creating something beautiful as a way of inspiring others. I think that's absolutely fine.
And speaking as a time traveller, it is for all of us just very heartening to find examples in the past of concerns that preoccupy us in the present.
Yeah.
So, for example, the idea of a country reunited existed in mythology in terms of the story of Brutus of Troy being the first king of Britain, defeating the giants and handing Cornwall to one of his sons, Scotland to another, and Wales to another. And when James I of England, James IV of Scotland, came to the throne, six. I
rate such as people in the audience.
Top marks. The pageant that was put on for James I during his coronation involved lots of masks and performances that were all about unification. So it wasn't a surprise that Brutus of Troy was there in his kind of nonsensical, mythical British form, just to tell the people of London, we are being reunified again. And I'm shocked that Brexit didn't produce any of these myths, or maybe it happened without me knowing about it. But I think there are these moments that repeat themselves throughout history.
I think that's absolutely right. One of the beautiful decorated scrolls that we have at the Antiquaries is celebrating the birth of I think it's the first son of Henry VIII, the one that was known as the Winter's Child, who died after a very short period of time. And it's this enormously long parade of trumpeters, people on horseback. In the middle, you've got the sort of ceremonial lying in bed. But you're actually seeing real people, including one of the trumpeters is a man of colour, that they've managed to find out that they know him by name. So it's a real representation of London at the time. I'm also interested in what you were saying about looking back to history to give us a perspective and a sense of reassurance. Mm-hmm. And that's something that in my previous job at the Science Museum was very much in my mind during the pandemic. I led the team of medical curators and we formed the COVID-19 collecting project, which is, I think, probably internationally the biggest collection of material relating to the pandemic. And the first thing my team and I did when planning out what to collect and what to chuck was to look back through the Spanish flu pandemic, which has no presence at all in museum collections. I mean, literally, internationally, it's simply not there. So
there's one memorial, I think, in London to the Spanish flu.
In terms of the objects, I mean, in the Science Museum, which has got about 170,000 objects relating to medicine, there's maybe 5, and they're pretty tangential as well. So I suppose really the point I'd like to make is that it's looking it's by looking back at the past that we get perspective and reassurance, but also it's telling the human story as well. So like with the parades or the role that I know you're so passionate about, and we ought to say we've got moving wallpaper behind us in case you get bored of looking at me and Adam. We will be taking questions afterwards. So if any catches your eye, how's that? Just hold on to that.
I think one of the greatest treasures at the Society of Antiquaries is something called the Roll Chronicle, which you'll see pictures of eventually, which chronicles the lineage of the British monarchy, tracing it all the way back to Adam and Eve. I think there's a few classical figures in there, and there's a print in the exhibition here where I've taken this not lightheartedly, but I want to make the connection between the goddess, the god Zeus, and Prince Harry. So my my chronology traces the royal family back through the Anglo-Saxons, and then back through all of the mythical kings from Geoffrey of Monmouth's pseudo history of the British monarchs, and then all the way back to Bruce of Troy, who was the grandson of Aeneas, who was obviously the lover of Aphrodite, and it tells the British people that we're all refugees from Troy. There are counterclaimants. I think the Turkish also claim this. But I love the idea that the first. But the first king of Britain, mythical king of Britain, was an Italian of Turkish extraction, who's with a bunch of Albanian men came to Britain with his Greek wife.
Anyway. But again, the title of this talk is The Artist and The Archivist. So in other words, the person who's inspired by collections and the person who has to care for them. So Adam gets to look at the images of the Roll Chronicle, and I do urge you to do the same. It is. I think it's fully digitised.
Yes, it's fully digitised.
So you can see it, and of course the reality is stunning, but it is a monster to look. It's about this wide, and it's 48 feet long. So you can display sections of it, but it's very stressful to care for. And yes, of course, it's vertical as well. So I don't know laying it on the ground, but it is. It's one of the many jewels, I think, of the collection of the society.
And like a lot of things, the circumstances of its creation I'm interested in, because you have no idea quite how this thing was commissioned or who made it. And going back to the painter-stainers, we've kind of very little idea about who these people were, but they were involved in major historical events. So even at painter-stainers' dinners in their livery hall now, they will still give speeches about the Field of the Cloth of Gold, when Henry VIII went to France, and he took all of this canvas with him that weighed something like 60 tons that had been painted by the painter-stainers, and then they recreated the interior of a fortress on the fields of France. And then what happened to this thing? Probably reused, repurposed, thrown away. Most houses in London would have had a painted cloth or work by a painter-stainer stretched across the walls. All this stuff is thrown out, like the way we throw away a piece of plasterboard when we're redoing the kitchen these days. And these individuals, there might be a few invoices and receipts. It's kind of, like I was saying to Nick, more like the world of painting and decorating than the fine arts.
Or like one of those murals that you stick to the wall of like a tropical beach or a beechwood or something like that.
But the painted cloth was superseded by wallpaper and panelling and other fashions. And maybe some of the painters who would go into Drury Lane and start painting backcloths there. But it's still a very impermanent art.
I'm just wondering if we ought to say a little bit more about the livery companies, because I know it's something that we're both interested in, and they're such a sort of a strange beast, and we shouldn't take it for granted that everybody in the room knows what they actually are.
And Natasha's dress should signal her out as a barber surgeon.
Yes, I am a barber because of my interest in history of medicine. There are two companies that are interested in medicine: the Apothecaries and then the barbers. So yes, I am a barber, but I do a lot about the Apothecaries as well. And you are a painter.
I'm a painter-stainer, but of course, because they are companies representing certain trades, they have archivists and they have archives, and it's a great source for the archivist and for the artist in terms of, I went to the painter-stainers archive, but there wasn't much there for me.
but they're a great resource for telling the stories of trades in Britain, and especially their relationship with the court.
Yeah.
Because whenever the king needed to fight a war, he would go to the City of London the same way that the current chancellor will go to the City of London when they need a bob or two. So there's always been that kind of strange relationship between the mercantile and then the legal world at Westminster. My theory is to do with boats. That the Romans, they couldn't land at Southend because of the malaria, and then they came up the river in their boats, and they were able to land at kind of shored up harbours. So they built their harbour there, and that became the City of London, Walbrook, and another great mercantile heart of the Roman Empire. And when the Romans disappeared, the Vikings came up the Thames in their longboats. They couldn't land at the Roman ports because they needed a shore to get their longboats up. So they carried on up the river, and they landed at Westminster. So there's still this separation between the two. Dane law and writing of laws and everything being kind of by the book at Westminster, and then City of London, which is Roman, and it's all about pleasure and money and champagne and good times. That's my theory, anyway, and it still remains this separation of the city, and the livery companies are very much part of that redistribution of wealth, because there are lots of wealthy people in the city, charitable giving.
So I can't remember how many of them are there. Are there about 40 or so?
I think it's 111
There's
now.
40 that have got their own halls.
Yes. They're the Great 12, who were the original 12. I made some paintings for the Merchant Tailors Company last year. And so during COVID, they redid their loos, which doesn't seem very unprepossessing. They needed the artist to do the loos. But being a livery company and being in a great hall that straddles Threadneedle Street and Cornhill, the loos are pretty spectacular. And they're even more spectacular. But they created half a dozen schools, and they're well known for being the 6th and the 7th livery company, which is where this phrase the 6s and 7s comes from, because they both arrived at court with their petition to be a livery company at the same time as the Skinners. So the decision was made that one of them would be the 6th one year, and then the other the 6th the following year. So there were a dozen in the Great 12, and I think 40 halls, and then.
I think anybody who's interested in time travel should make an effort to go to some of the livery companies. But of course, being within the centre of London, they were very badly affected by the bombing. And I think that even the most enthusiastic time traveller would find it difficult, actually, to pass themselves back in time if you are in some of these really soulless, including, unfortunately, I think the Barbers, my own one, rebuilds. The Mercers is got a dreadful sort of Soviet vibe to it. I mean, they're really not charming places, but some of them, the Apothecaries,
even the Merchant Tailors Crypt, because of course in London, as we were discussing the other day, the further down you go, the more time travel-y it becomes. And there's probably stuff underneath, because it's the original site of the barber surgeons. I think they're also they're digging at the end of my road.
Well, there's bits of London Wall in the edges of their grounds. So so I mean, I suppose again the advice for the time traveller is to look down, but also to look up.
Yes,
because you can have shop fronts and things redone, but often older stuff is up very high. It gives you a sort of different perspective.
Of course, famously they've got Mappin and Webb's frieze on the cheap side. But so now that we're getting more tower blocks in London, it's ironic that the higher you go, the further down you have to sink your piles in the ground. So there are parts of the City of London now where they have to go deeper than the standard 10 metres. So I worked a lot with Bloomberg when they were building their headquarters, and they went down 15 metres, which enabled them to go beyond Roman London to pre-Roman London, and not much there, the odd dinosaur. But at the end of my street, they're about to go deeper. This is the A10, which is where the Roman stuck their dead. So you dig anywhere by the side of the A10, and you're outside of the City of London, you'll find some Roman flip-flops. But I've always been attracted to, because I grew up on the A10. Ironically, I was brought up near Ely, and I've ended up at the beginning of the A10. This is kind of what they call it, Ermine Street. and one of the original Roman roads. And I always wanted to be right at the centre of things, which not just geographically, but in terms of history, right at the heart of history. Because where my studio is, I know that underneath there's the Romans, there's the medieval hospital, St Mary's Hospital.
You should talk more about your studio, because I think that's very interesting. Describe it.
You're all welcome, by the way, as friends in confidence now. So, quite unexpectedly, I found myself, I was evicted from my old studio, which was a little sweet shop, and I was looking around for somewhere, and I had a friend whose father was on a board of the synagogue, whose congregation, the oldest Ashkenazi congregation still operating in Britain. It's called Sandys Row, and originally it would have been called Parliament Court when it was a Huguenot chapel. So we have a basement that would have been the foundations of a Huguenot chapel in late 1600s. They would have built a wooden shack there. And before that, it was Henry VIII's artillery ground. So the Huguenot chapel was called L'Église de l'Artillerie. And then between the Jewish congregation, they came over with William of Orange, which is extraordinary. And so they'd been in this community in Spitalfields, East London, making cigars, furry hats, whatnot, for a long time before they had, as a community, made enough money to purchase their own building, which was Sandys Row. In the interim, we had a group called the Philadelphians there, who lost their faith as a congregation. They were nonconformists. That's a very charismatic preacher, turned everyone off the good book, and they became Britain's first ethical society. So they still exist. The South Place Ethical Society is still at Conway Hall in Clerkenwell. And my friend's father was on the board. I was looking for a space. He said, we've had this hard to let attic in the synagogue. So I'm the house mensch. I work in the synagogue's attic. Except on high days and holidays, but it is a form of time travel. And when I'm working there, the paintings I made for this exhibition, I had the radio on playing 17th century music. The paints I was mixing are from recipes that came from the 17th century. And pretty much materially, I'm in the same place as a painter stainer who's been commissioned to deck out someone's house in the city. In that era.
Are there any ghosts in the synagogue?
Plenty of ghosts.
Oh, have you seen
They manifest themselves in like annoyingly locking doors. I haven't seen any, no. But the old ladies who provide the food for the Saturday services won't go there alone. And
anywhere at all in the building?
Anywhere at all, especially in the basement. I believe at Society of Antiquaries you have a few. Well, especially Dr. Johnson's house must have lingering presences of.
Obviously, I don't believe in ghosts. I'm a complete rationalist, obviously. But just in case, I like to perhaps doff my cap. So at Dr. Johnson's house, as you probably know, again, that in the heart of the city and heart of the sort of the merchants' history of London, Johnson moved to 17 Gough Square to write his dictionary. So it's similar with much of the a little bit further east of the city. Buildings were domestic and also workplaces as well. So it was, Johnson lived there, had his various hangers-on living there, but it was a place for the dictionary to actually be written. It was finally published in 1755, just to locate everybody. So I was lucky enough to be curator there for 10 years, and we actually lived in the little curator's lodge that was built at the turn of the very early 20th century, when it was turned into a museum for the curator of the time to live in. So it's if you happen to be in Fleet Street, it's a wonderful example of a 17th century merchant townhouse. But you could see the curator's cottage next door, where my husband and I lived,
and a very atmospheric pub next door.
Yes, the old Cheshire cheese. Yeah. It was our local until we had the twins. I will say that the cottage is very, very small, and it was all right until the twins started walking. It was okay when they weren't mobile.
I think it's ironic. In the powerhouse of the British economy are these kind of pockets of
and you look at the maps that they're Adam's fashion, and actually, although again a lot of bombing in that area, the alleyways of Fleet Street follow exactly the same pre-fire layout. even though the buildings are totally, they've often got the same names and they literally follow the same routes.
But Christopher Wren famously, after I'd made a lot of maps about Christopher Wren's London last year for the tercentenary of his death, age 90. He, within, I think, 6 days, managed to come up and print a plan to present to the monarch of a new city of London with rationalised streets and piazzas and fountains, grids. Yeah. But even in those 6 days, within those 6 days, people had already gone to the surveyors and said, "This is my bit, this hexagonal bit here, and I buried my cheese here, so I want that bit." And London is chaotic and driven by the necessities of individuals. So people got back what was theirs.
But it holds its own spirit. I mean, I know Peter Ackroyd's theory that there is these individual areas that keep their spirit of place. So Smithfield Market has dealt in meat for 1,000 years, and that has not changed.
Yeah.
And is there a reason for that, or is it just habit or practice, or is it something in the ether? I don't know.
Well, I know if you walk from Islington down Upper Street, then down St John Street, all of the pavements either side are kind of raised up still because of all the slurry that the cattle would have produced when they're coming down from Holloway Road. Also, if you look at Cloth Fair, which is where St Bartholomew the Great Church, I think is it the oldest church in London?
Bartholomew the Great,
yes. St Bartholomew the Great is older, because that was established in 1123. And I made some drawings for St Bartholomew's Church for their 900th anniversary the other year. That's raised, the part where Cloth Fair is, because it's where they'd sweep all of the ashes from the martyrs who were executed there, which is a kind of terrifying bit of time travel.
When you're developing your maps, your sort of creative historic maps, are you interested in the place names and the road names and what you just said the Holloway Road, which of course links to the Hollow Way, the roads that have sunken down through usage.
Yes.
Is that something you link into?
I love the false etymologies. Yes, are really good as well. And everyone will tell you that. The Infanta of Castile, which has nothing to do with it, or the Charin Cross, Charin. But that's part of popular culture, and it's probably someone making up a story in the pub about port out, starboard home. But
that's not true.
I'll leave that one.
Okay.
Yeah. But that, I mean, the etymological kind of misnomers become part of the history of the place as well, and lead to the Elephant and Castle pub has an elephant with a castle on it that comes from someone's coat of arms, but and it becomes a part of the geography, physical appearance of a place. But it goes back to using artifacts from collections such as yours, because they are primary sources, and you can't argue with them because they were there at the time. It's just the meaning that is contentious.
You see, I'm surrounded by people who argue with what history is telling us the entire time.
I did like you telling me, was it the Cerne Abbas giant?
Oh God, yes.
You had a discussion
and don't even get me started on
an hour-long discussion of it, but then nobody's any the wiser.
No, I mean, honestly, they're like, is it prehistoric? Is it Saxon? Is it, 17th century? Nobody knows.
There were caricatures of antiquaries from the 18th, 19th century, because they were seen as, if you're a man of a certain age, kind of digging around in the countryside, people would have thought you were nuts.
Yeah.
And or an interest in mummified skeletons. That's quite suspect at the time.
I'd say, certainly archaeology only really became, a discipline until, really quite recently. Certainly well into the 19th century, and it was seen, as I was saying, with the three men in a pub. Studying history, certainly through objects, was seen as at best quirky. It was a very, very odd thing to do. The collection of the society has largely built up through fellows bringing stuff in and saying, "What's this? Let's have a little chat about it," and then just leaving it behind. So things that people found interesting at different times.
I used to do that as a child. Just make my own museums. But going back to the time travel thing and that Daily Mail story I mentioned to you about. it's a ridiculous headline. Most men, given a time machine, would go back and kill Hitler. This is true. They interviewed, a group of men. That's what they do. But became particularly interested when retelling these origin myth stories about how origin myths have been marshalled by fairly dodgy individuals as a nationalist story. I don't think Brutus of Troy has suffered such a fate.
No.
But certainly, in Germanic mythology, Dr. Goebbels would have with some certainty, told the nation that they were part of this lineage and that it had some kind of Aryan purity. And I think that kind of certainty is nonsense, but at the same time, it's interesting to see how. And the aim is kind of not the aim of the antiquary to be certain about things, although they are quite fussy people. I found. But it's kind of a quantity. You want to know with certainty that this happened, or this is the reason this object was made. But at the same time, it's interesting that there is the counter theory, and then there's also the ego of the archivist and the academic, that they need to have a counter theory because otherwise academia just dies.
It doesn't move forward. No, I mean, I think that's a very valid point. And of course, we all know academics who have their pet theories. They don't want to let go of them. You have a younger generation challenging things, but the historical interpretation does change, and it has to change as time goes on. There isn't historical fact in that way. Going back to what you were saying about family trees, and I know this is something that you're interested in a again in a more sort of creative sense. Adam does these wonderfully beautiful family trees, but they do have this they can have like you were saying about Nazi Germany, they can have a sinister bent to them, planning out who your
23andMe would be a boon to the SS.
Definitely.
So would your Marks and Spencer's loyalty card.
Well, except that I mean, I was once on the programme. What's it called? Who Am I?
Oh yeah.
You do the not the British one, but the Australian one, which was
Who the hell am I?
fascinating. Yeah, because who the hell am I? I mean, actually, that's a good. I should have called it that because it was a lovely comedian. I had no idea who he was. Of course, he was massive in Australia. His grandfather or something had served in Turkey and was injured and went to Nightingale's Hospital, Scutari. So I was running the Nightingale Museum at the time, so I went out to meet him. Lovely chap, like Johnson actually. He was very keen on Johnson. And it was only at the farewell dinner when he was talking about his wife protecting the children from the press. And I said, hang on, are you very famous? And of course they all fell around laughing and said, he really, really is. He's absolutely massive. But they were saying that in the American version of Who Am I, it has a strong racial element to it because, of course, if you go back into anyone's family trees, you're going to find ethnically diverse, backgrounds. So actually taking well-known people and showing that you've got an Indian great-grandmother or something like that was actually really useful in, they felt, encouraging tolerance. I thought that was really interesting.
I think there are also a lot of unifying factors in common myths. Shakespeare, for example, can be taught across the globe and everyone understands what's going on, despite the characters being Italian, Greek, whatnot. They're universal stories, aren't they? And the same with family history is family history. But obviously, the contingencies place you within a different set of circumstances historically. I mean, I always think that we're still medievalists in Britain. That was our big moment as an artist, just in terms of visual production, because of the monasteries, just the level of craftsmanship in terms of the illuminated manuscripts, the industrial aspect of producing all these volumes pre-printing press, and simply visually just the colour. I mean that's medieval. That's kind of early Georgian, but the Tudor buildings weren't like this with black frame and white infill. They were just they'd cover everything in decorative Disney-like colour. And yeah, the Tudors were medievalists, the Victorians were medievalists, and I think this all goes back to that monastic tradition, intellectually and and visually.
Well, I mean, William Morris certainly was.
Yeah.
I suppose William Morris is always in my mind because the Society of Antiquaries owns and manages Kelmscott Manor, which might be known to some of you, William Morris's summer house. It has to be summer house because it's bleak there in winter. It really is. It floods and it's cold, even in Morris's day. Mm-hmm. And he moved there. He and Rossetti found it, and they moved there for the summer months with William Morris's family. And yes, of course, he was a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries. He was a passionate medievalist. I mean, that informed all of his work. So the influence on our culture today of the pre-Raphaelites, you can't look on the Dunelm website of the cheap bedding in the sale. Not that I've been doing that, obviously. It's all William Morris.
It's a utopianism. I think it's kind of disappeared, probably because of the experiments of modernism in the 20th century. We're not utopians anymore.
But is the ideal period in history always 50 years ago? Wasn't that an argument?
It is an argument. Yes.
So when is that now? 1974?
Does that work?
I don't think so.
No, it doesn't work.
I don't think we'd want to go back
to ask people in 50 years' time. Yeah. So I wrote down some stupid questions for the time traveller I should ask you, because it's a good party game, isn't it? So we were speaking earlier about, you told me about your children being taken to the Museum of London, as my daughter also grew up in the City of London, and part of their rite of passage is to go to the Museum of London and look at the burnt brick in the Great Tower of London, and they stand there saying, well, I'm looking at like a charred brick. One of the and however enthusiastic you are as a parent, it's very difficult to bring, the wonders of London's history to a charred brick. Well, equally, I'd take people to where Shakespeare was the lodger, and it's kind of a car park off London Wall. This is where Shakespeare was, and they're looking around at some concrete render. And, no, Shakespeare. Yeah, okay. And so I've come up with a few questions for the time traveller. What is your most uninspiring relic?
At the Society?
At the Society.
Oh, gosh. I mean, heraldry doesn't really do a lot for me personally, and there's a lot of heraldry. There's a lot of book plates.
What about the most unprepossessing?
The most unprepossessing one has to be what's known as the Wart. It's catalogued as the Wart. We haven't got much human remains in the collection. And when I said what human remains are in the collection, thinking, please don't make me repatriate stuff back to Australia, because I did that once and it wasn't fun. No, it's the Wart. Now, this is actually a horny excrescence that was found on the back of a man's hand in the pub in 1780, and they got his permission to yank or knock it off, and kept it in a little box and brought it along as a curiosity to the Society of Antiquaries, and thoughtfully left it there, where it still is like a little bit of horn. It's really uninspiring. It tells us, and I like history of medicine. It tells us we know nothing about the man. It tells us nothing about the past. It's ugly. You can't display it. It's probably unethical. That is.
There's a nice randomness to it as well.
Yeah, it does. It's not really a.
But there's I always thought the antithesis to the your collection is a pub in the City of London called Dirty Dick's.
Yes.
Which in the basements, I think it still has this collection behind some chicken wire of stuff they found, in the cellar. The guy was called, the landlord was called Dirty Dick for obvious reasons. And it's like mummified cats and mice and bits of bones and sandwich and stuff. And it's all just hanging randomly in this cage. But uninspiring.
So what's your most uninspiring object?
Dirty Dicks.
I mean, that's it. But that's not in a museum, though.
It's not in a museum.
But it's historic.
It's historic. Well, I do like, I quite like Christ's footprint. It's Muhammad's footprint in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, which is, when you're a child, you pour plaster into the badger's prints. It's like that, but it's Muhammad.
Oh, the London
Could be
Stone.
any.
London
we were
Stone
talking about that
features in
yes.
one of your artworks.
So in one of my
Boring.
paintings that shows Brutus of Troy with his men stopping en route to Britain to receive a prophecy from after making libations to the hunter goddess Diana. And then she tells Brutus in a dream that he will find a land in the north, blah blah, and to take the pedestal with them. So they take the pedestal from Diana's statue with them from this ruined temple, which then apparently this is one of the origin myths of this lump of rock that's in a kind of rather nasty. It used to be in a nasty cage in what was it? It was a Sports Direct, I think, on Cannon Street.
It was like in a sub-basement.
I used to take my daughter and say, "Look, this is the foundation of London.
This
I think it's oolite, this rock.
Yeah.
Like it's another kind of so what moment.
Yeah.
But the object doesn't match the stories.
Yeah.
As
That
I
has to
tell
be.
my family at Christmas when it goes. The other one is the most pinchable relic. Not in terms of practically stealing
Yes,
this,
but
most covetable.
I
object.
suppose from a sort of museum security point of view, I mean, basically anything that's shiny or looks attractive or is portable, obviously, and people will actually ignore far more valuable and dull things. I mean, I won't name the museum, but some years ago, a historic house museum had a case prized open, and they stole these really, dull 1930s ceramic figurines, which you could get on eBay for £5, and ignored the first editions that were priceless in there because they looked cute.
It's like the Holy Grail, isn't it?
Yeah,
you go
exactly.
for the big shiny cup.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not. It's asking
We all know
for,
that's not the
it's
cup.
asking for trouble.
Yes,
It's asking
yes.
for trouble. So anything that's small and attractive and portable,
Yes.
preferably gold or silver.
I did say I'd have Trajan's column, but then
You can't have that.
I can't have that.
You cannot tuck that in your backpack.
of course, your time traveller. One of the reasons for travelling in time is to meet people. So you'd obviously want to go and meet Florence Nightingale, or maybe not.
I'm not sure I would actually. I mean, I have to say, I used to be director of the Florence Nightingale Museum, and I have the greatest respect for her. She revolutionised public health, and particularly the role of women in healthcare in this country, and had a massive international influence. I don't think she was a laugh a minute.
Last year when I was doing these maps about Christopher Wren's London, just thought this guy's amazing, but never kept a diary. You only know about him through other people's letters. And then I thought, like Florence Nightingale, probably pretty boring.
Well, no, I mean, she wrote a lot.
Yeah.
So she wrote huge amounts. That's in the later part of her life. That's how she communicated. And
Strong work
she
ethic.
doesn't come across well. She doesn't.
Yeah.
So I mean, it would be interesting to meet her, of course. But no, given the choice, I would be 17th century, 1770s London and meet Johnson, Boswell, Reynolds, Mrs. Thrale. That period in history. I think seeing Georgian London around Fleet Street.
Personally, I'd rather go to Grub Street and meet all the writers who didn't quite cut the mustard.
Yeah.
All
in the coffee house. I could see you knocking around an 18th century coffee.
Hook's diary is an amazing record of that period of reconstruction.
And I think, like Boswell's diary, it's got the ring of truth to it as well, which they don't always. Where would you go back to? Roman Britain? Or?
No, not necessarily. I'd go back to probably Tudor Britain. Do a bit of kind of. I'd have to be like a Brighton Catholic though. Which I don't know. Do you take your religion of birth with you when you time travel?
Well, I would certainly take very good teeth. And a guarantee I would not actually get ill or have an infection or anything.
You didn't want to take the children's illustrated Bible, though.
No.
Get you in all sorts of trouble. But you have to. These are things you have to prepare yourself.
So where would you go? So medieval London? I mean, like the court,
probably the pre-Reformation, and because when I was doing the research about St Bartholomew's community, these monastic communities probably did a better job than the NHS. Sorry, I might not allowed to say that. So St Bartholomew's, the brothers would go out into the streets of London. If someone was lying in the street or they looked as if they were in distress, they'd just take them in. And individuals who are kept in like St Mary's Spitalfields and St Bartholomew's would have been able to survive the plague because there was less exposure because they were within a contained community and given lots of bed rest. And I think in terms of charitable work, it's straightforward. If someone's in distress, take them in.
I mean, obviously that's only for the very poor.
Yeah.
The church.
Yeah, if you could look after yourself.
Then you did. Yeah.
It's one of my favourite stories about John Stowe, who's one of them. I would like to meet John Stowe, the first surveyor of London.
Survey of London.
Yeah, who catalogued everything in every church and every building in the city. It was a remarkable. It was a remarkable achievement and just an amazing concept that didn't really exist before him. There were like parish records and whatnot. But he recorded everyone's memorials in every church, and if he didn't like them or if he had a bad reputation, he wouldn't put you in his survey. And of course, then the Great Fire of London, after Stowe's long gone, destroys everything. And if he hasn't recorded your memorial, you're lost to history. But unfortunately, he fell into dire poverty at the end of his life. He was a merchant tailor, and he pleaded with them to give him a pension. They said, we'll go to the king, we'll ask what we can do. And they came back and they said to poor old John Stowe, we're better than a pension. We've got you a beggar's license.
Oh, God.
Anyway, poor old John Stowe. But yeah, John Stowe would have been, I don't know, in my circle of friends.
I still think you're being a bit vague. If I'm going back to number 17 Gough Square in 1770.
Okay, I have to be specific. No, I think I'd follow Hook round the coffee houses. As one academic has done, they've worked out from his diary where he was, in which coffee house. He was in a different coffee house every day.
Yeah.
I'd follow Hook around.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good answer.
And it's easily done because we know where he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what you need. If you're time travelling, a lot of time travel literature involves a talisman, doesn't it? You need an object that belongs to the past to take you back there. But then that's what museums are in a way, I suppose. Imaginative reconstruction. So how about who would you travel back in time to slap? If that was my daughter's question, I asked. Not Hitler, by the way, because that wouldn't do anything.
No, not Hitler.
Used to it.
Yes. Well, my first thought was, my brother, when I had a row with him about 6 and 4.
But there are those people in history who kind of makes, like Henry VIII, they kind of could have gone one way, could have gone the other way. All they need is a little bit of tipping over the edge.
I don't know. I think slap implies, not as serious. So not removing Stalin, Hitler.
Yeah.
To be honest, even Henry VIII, obviously incredibly influential. I think I'd be looking smaller scale. I have to say, the Duke of Windsor always gets on my wick.
Yeah.
I mean, really, just that. Anybody who never questions themselves for a single second and has that sort of
in the right circumstances, like Ascot, you'd have got a round of applause.
Yeah, but just that awful entitled, fascist leaning, just awful. Yes, I'd like to slap him. I think
child prodigies as well, Mozart.
But is that often their fault? You can't really blame a 6-year-old for being annoying.
No, not when he was 6. When he was an annoying kind of 20-year-old, probably.
But again,
I suppose,
he's an annoying 20-year-old because he was like wheeled around the country age 6.
All geniuses need a slap.
I think we're being a bit harsh there.
Sorry. And yes.
Well, hang on. Who would you like to slap?
Mozart.
Oh no.
No, because he's a genius.
Someone who deserves it.
Okay, somebody who's genius. One of the popes, probably. I'm trying to think which one. One of the Medici popes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll allow that.
Yeah. Till his big hat fell off. Biggest mystery that the biggest mystery that can be solved through time travel is.
Oh gosh, I've got no idea.
Because there's so many. Stonehenge.
Stonehenge is discussed a lot at the Society of Antiquaries. They're big on Stonehenge, and that is obviously constantly under review. So, I mean, if you walked into the library at the Antiquaries at any time and asked them about mysteries, they would all come up with millions.
Would it be nice with certainty to ask someone how this roll chronicle works and how you've managed to trace the Tudor?
Which bits of it did you make up?
Yes. Because I do a lot of family trees for members of the House of Lords, and there is always like a little false flag in there somewhere that takes them back to the kings of France or to Robert the Bruce was the last one.
Yeah, I suppose one of the stars of the collection at the Society is the collection of Tudor portraits that we've got. I mean, the best known one is the one of Mary the First. which is, if you think of a portrait of Mary I, it's probably that one. It's there's a smaller version of it in the NPG, but this is a full length one, and it's pretty amazing.
With the famous pearl.
Yes, and you could see all of her outfit, and it's a stunning piece. But there's all of the Tudors, so their eyes slightly sort of follow me around the room if I'm in the lecture hall. So I suppose greatest mystery, Princess in the Tower.
Oh yes,
because Richard III is, again, his eyes are following me around the room all the time.
And that is a solvable mystery without time travel.
It is, but it's one that I think that is always held up as being a mystery, and that, I mean, certainly the Richard III Society, who have a very passionate interest in their subject, will always hold up that that's going to be a mystery forever.
We were talking earlier about people who dress up as Tudors. That's a different kind of time travel, isn't it? Or dress up as
it is,
and
I think reenactment is another way. As you interpret through art, and I suppose I just interpret through caring for the collection and keeping historic organisations as open to the public and to interested parties as possible.
But they take it to another level, and it becomes like a culinary exercise in time travel.
But it's also a community. My friend's son is a Viking, and he makes his own shields, costumes. His girlfriend's another Viking, as is her father. They live up in York because, of course, they do.
You said he had a nasty accident with a
yes,
pike.
he did. I thought we wouldn't go into that, actually.
Play with the Vikings. You're going to get
let's just say that my friend's chances of grandchildren are now halved due to an unfortunate accident with a spear. He's fine. But it was rather painful and unfortunate at the time, because they really go into battle. I mean, maximum effort with proper weapons.
Yeah, I have a sealed knot cousin whose wife. I know. I think he ran off with a camp follower on it.
Oh no!
It all ended in tears, but probably very authentic way of handling things.
Well, I could top that because of the Nightingale Museum. We employed an agency that supplied us with a group of actresses who acted Florence Nightingale in full costume, and we had a rota, so it was a different Florence every day. We had a school session in, and one of the Florences ran off with one of the other Florence's husbands. No, I mean, you're laughing, but it was a nightmare because none of the other Florences would speak to her. Honestly, it was awful.
I can see I can see the script in progress here. Yes. But what's the Nightingale Museum? Was it closed because of COVID? I mean, it closed during COVID, but it's not. It doesn't really exist as a museum anymore.
No, it does. It has. I'm very pleased to say it has reopened.
Okay.
I think with limited opening hours. The Nightingale is actually within St Thomas's Hospital itself. So of course, during the pandemic, the restrictions were even worse, and having than ordinary places. So they had.
No, I was there a few weeks before the lockdown. I took my daughter to see the Florence Nightingale Museum. So what's a virus? What's a pandemic? What's a lockdown? And it didn't cross our minds that any of this would happen. But there you go. That's time travel.
Yeah, it is.
I have to say,
sorry.
I wish I'd learned history from you too. I mean, goodness me, it's just so fascinating and wonderful. Really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just a really
I'm sure everyone's got lots of questions about time travel.
Deafening silence.
Yes.
I mean, it's extraordinary. I have to say, Adam, I've known you a few years now, and every time I meet you, I'm fascinated by the fact that you reinterpret history, you animate history, watching Wolf Hall, I was expecting to see you in every scene.
That's true.
And sort of, you have an extraordinary ability to be both respectful to history, incredible research and academic knowledge about history, but to make it so accessible, amusing and fun. And people spend hours looking at the detail. It's just so extraordinary. And I think you are a time traveler. I do wonder sometimes in terms of your extraordinary.
Well, I've got the luxury of being an artist and being able to play fast and loose. If I'd gone into academia, there'd be all sorts of people pulling me up for what I'm doing, as we were discussing earlier about the archaeologists I worked with at the Bloomberg dig at Walbrook, refusing to tell me. I say, I think I was annoying the hell out of them. So, what's it like being a Roman? What would they have? What they've done here? And they're so difficult to say. Can't say. Couldn't possibly say. And so, no, I want an answer. I want to know something certain here. So, well, give us wait till we finish the dig. So, I came up with this project to investigate archaeologists' dreams, and I gave them all this task of letting me know what they dreamt about when they came the night before, when they came back, and they wrote these dreams down, and they're all about. So especially if Romans appear in your dreams. So I got all these stories where they tell me about, I was in Earl's Court digging up the Hippodrome, and so I just thought, as an artist, I'd call myself a conceptual artist, I suppose, because there are other ways of getting to this imaginative material without it being. I don't call history dry, but people assume that academicism or archaeology is a dry subject.
Yes, you make it anything but. You make it anything but.
But I mean, these people are passionate about their subjects, and
aren't we lucky?
I've worked with some future. I did a map of my neighbourhood, Shoreditch, called Shoreditch 3000, a map of the ruins. And I worked with these futurologists in the City of London. They said, well, they work with businesses to anticipate what's going to happen in finance and politics and whatnot. So anything beyond 7 years is very difficult, they said. So I want to go forward another 1,000 years. So I had to work with children instead. So I said, imagine 1,000 years, what's going to be here? And they've got crazy imaginations. And I took a particular, with the Shoreditch 3000, I took a particular milieu, so architecture or science, and then they came up with what's going to happen. And we did this bogus timeline. I think you can see it on the internet, but Doctor Who did come up, but he's not the same Doctor Who as I remember.
They change.
They change. So, I mean, with the future, like the futurologist said, 7 years beyond that, it's difficult to predict if you're in a realm of fiction. But
I mean, I like dystopian novel. I have to say, and I don't know why, but there's not like a really ghastly one, but like there's sort of like a cosy, slightly in the future one. I find those quite reassuring.
Yeah. I did like watching not Doctor Who but Star Trek when I was a child, and wondering whether the art on the walls in Star Trek was the art of the future, or whether they were antiques from like the mid-1960s.
But not of painted.
Well, tapestries are objects of value, and a painted cloth, you could commission it by the yard. And so whether you're a wealthy merchant or whether you're like a poor printer, you could decorate your house with one of these cloths. Quite often they are done for special occasions. So your daughter and her new husband might be coming back from somewhere, and you'd celebrate their return with this cloth. However,
take it down when he was beheaded.
Yeah, something like that. Yes. And so they weren't high status objects, although they were commissioned by people of high status. They weren't low status objects. They were just generic, like everyone has a mobile phone or has wallpaper or has a TV nowadays. But I was just extremely fortunate to be commissioned by this guy, Cash, who was doing up his house in Shropshire. And I was working, he was my editor. I did the covers for this magazine in the 90s. And he said, have you ever thought about painting on walls? I'm doing up my house. And he lived in this extraordinary Tudor manor house with an Elizabethan gatehouse. And I said, are you seriously going to let me loose on this? I've never done anything like this before. I think I painted my room in Rome, with a frescoed ceiling and whatnot, because I lived in Rome for a year. And he just let me loose on this place. So I started researching the English domestic interior, what kind of stuff would have been authentic. They took away a few panels and found some, what they call black work, which are just like cursive hastily drawn images of men on horses. They would have been from, I think Prince Rupert stayed there, so there would have been, I think, from the time Prince Rupert stayed there, they would have drawn his entourage on the wall. So I took what was there, these fragments, and then as a contemporary artist interpreted them with what I researched in the V&A library, and the Museum of the Home is around the corner from me. They have a small library. But without that kind of opportunity, I wouldn't have been able to go down that rabbit hole. But I think we need good patrons as artists. and imaginative patrons, and they're few and far between.
Yes,
I mean, people like you are few and far between, because I find if I approach a place with an idea, it kind of scares them.
Yeah.
Well, I wander around the city of London. I talk to people all the time, and I did in Petworth. And who's your Peter? Is it Peter, your local?
Peter Jerome.
Yes, he's amazing. But as talking to people, you get stories.
Yeah.
You might get a load of old nonsense, but you get like a kind of a thread. And I've been in my own neighbourhood for 30-something years now, so I know what was there before and what was there before and what was there before. And the people who were there when I moved there knew what was there before. And I've got all kind of air raid wardens maps, and I'm working on a project called it used to be called Cock Lane, and I'm working on this project called Cock Lane, the most important
Cock
street.
Lane Ghost.
That's a different Cock Lane.
Oh,
sorry.
How many are there?
That's Scratching Fanny, isn't
Yes,
it?
Johnson,
Scratching Fanny and Cock
Johnson
Lane
and
Ghost.
Boswell went to visit Scratching Fanny in the
Yeah.
Cock Lane. So there's a different Cock Lane.
There's
I'm not interested in
well,
that.
Red Church Street used to be called Church Street, and before that was called Cock Lane. But my thing's called Cock Lane, most important street in the world, and it connects the street to every global event for the past 2,000 years. Like the Boudicca's invasion would have gone past this street. The first printing presses in Britain would have been there. There's still a kind of residual printing industry there, but I just found by talking to people, however nutty they are, which is why I don't like demise of the British pub.
Dinner pub.
Of course, yeah.
The LSA.
Me and your society started in 4 different pubs.
Yes, I mean, and one of them was, I think the third one was the Mitre, which is where Johnson and Boswell first had dinner together, just on Fleet Street. So again, it's nice to see all these threads of my past enthusiasms coming together.
Doesn't happen in a Starbucks.
No, it's really quote of the day, I think.
Right. Well, maybe it does. Maybe I'm missing something.
No, I don't think it does.
No.
But the coffee houses were very
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
They
Of
did
course.
the development of a lot of the City of London institutions and Lloyd's and the like.
Yes, they called them the penny universities. But they're a very male environment.
Well, I think
And,
also they were very individual. I think with the chain cafes, they are all exactly the same, and people know what
You
they're
don't go to a
getting.
particular Starbucks if you want to know the news from Jamaica.
No,
Even if it might be in
or to
Brixton,
hang out with fellow writers or fellow painters or fellow.
The coffee houses, they weren't assigned particular. Well, the insurance companies in the City of London would have dealt with different parts of the colony. So if all your money was in the West Indies, you'd go to the East India or West India Coffee House or Jamaica Coffee House. If it was in the Americas, you go to the American Coffee House. Or if you just wanted a good time, you'd go to that one that was floating in the Thames.
Yeah.
Which is full of dolly birds.
There's a very good book by. We wouldn't go to that one.
You wouldn't go to that, yes.
There's a very good book by Mark Manellis about the coffee houses of London. That if you're interested, it's a nice sort of jolly read.
There was a guy who used to do a tour of the coffee houses in the City of London, which involved a lot of kind of dressing up and people jumping out from alleyways, and they would make you this coffee as it would have been drunk in the early 18th century.
What was it like?
It apparently tasted between mud and excrement. Was the description of stuff.
It's like Starbucks.
Yes.
That's their new slogan.
But then there's another. I've just done a drawing about the history of Somerset House, which had this extraordinary kind of predates the what were the tea rooms called? Lions Tea Houses. Before that, there was the ABC, the Aerated Bread Company, opened all of these tea shops across London that became popular with intellectual young women, because then they would start these kind of equivalent of female versions of the very male coffee house clubs.
Or like book clubs.
Or according to particular interests.
And of course, the Society of Antiquaries, once it had finished, unfortunately, bobbing around the pubs of Fleet Street, its first permanent home was in Somerset House, and they only moved into Burlington House because the government wanted to use Somerset House, so they expanded on the building where the Royal Academy is out to form the courtyard.
But the good news about
century.
your institution is, as of last year,
as of last autumn, yes, so very recently.
Because who owns Burlington House? Is it the Crown?
So it was the Crown, but or rather the government, and it's now owned jointly. So not the Royal Academy. That is under because that's the earlier house. They have a different arrangement. but the 5 learned societies that form the 2 side wings of the courtyard, yes, I'm delighted to say that we are now owners, joint landlords of the buildings and the courtyard itself. And that the lease was finally completed in October last year, so only very recently. So it's a really exciting time for the society. It means that we can plan and move forward and have ownership for our own building.
Thank you very much indeed. It really has been fascinating and wonderful and entertaining.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed meeting you. Natasha, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.